Hello, my delicious co-creators. Lilou here. I'm in France. I'm in Bordeaux for a new interview. I know it's been a long time, but here I have an amazing person with me. We just done several interviews in French. I love this man. He's 82 years old. He's got so much knowledge on the UFOs, extraterrestrial beings, interstellars, traveling, and it's just a brilliant mind. So he's going to speak in English with a heavy French accent, but hold on to his words because there's so much knowledge in this video. We're going to start with this first part on Egypt. Why? Because you did an out-of-body experience. So we're going to talk about this out-of-body experience where you had amazing information on how the pyramids were built. So we're doing this first part on Egypt, linked to Atlantis, and we'll do a second part on aliens, UFOs, and all that. But it's very anchored. It's a long intro, but it's very much anchored into science, mathematics, because this is your background. You're astrophysician. You have done the most brilliant universities and research. You were part for many years, decades, of a big research group called CNRS. And you were director of the research there. So you've got this really anchored mind, and at the same time, you know, this open mind, let's say. So thank you for doing this interview.
Okay, you know, this was a very strange experience. The first time when I came to Cairo, it was by night. I was in my hotel, and then during the night, I was floating in the room. And then I went through the ceiling, and I could see the place with one pyramid, not the two, just Cheops pyramid, and was flying towards this pyramid. And I saw that I had strange sandals and strange shoes.
Oh, you had like a skirt.
Yeah, a skirt, exactly. And then when I landed, I heard an engineer who was giving orders to his people for the pyramid building. And then he saw me, and he started to talk to me with very loud voice.
To scream, to shout, yeah.
Yes. And I realized that I was in a precedent life in ancient Egypt. I was son neveu, comment on dit?
His nephew. So you were doing this past life experience, and you landed in Egypt.
Exactly.
So you were an engineer.
I am an engineer, but I was an engineer in that time too.
Yeah.
And then he was busy with pulling a big block of 70 tons, and I watched to this, and I took notes. You know, I memorized that. And then when I went back to my hotel, I went through the ceiling again. You can consider this is a dream, but a strange dream, where you pick some information that are functional.
Yeah. And you were able, what's amazing about your story is that you were able to take notes. So when you saw the pyramids and the construction and how they were doing it, you had your engineer mind on, and you came back and you wrote all this on a paper, huh?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's a lot of mysteries regarding the pyramids and how they were built, right?
I think the best thing for your people would be to look at my comic book on the pyramid.
He explained it in a comic book, I guess we say, that you can download for free, and it explains your whole what we're about to explain. So, and it's brilliantly, because you draw too. He drew it himself. I mean, it's quite something.
So in this story, I don't put my person in the script. It is my character who experiences this strange, but all what is told is true. And when I went back, we made a model of this system to pull the blocks, and I would say that I could build a pyramid with just wood, stones, and ropes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's all what they were using. So can you explain how they were, what you found out exactly, how the pyramid is actually, how did they bring the blocks and how it's built up? Because it's like, we're going to speak in meters, but 130 meters high for some of them. I mean, this is huge.
Yes, it's huge, and the main problem is how can you put a stone of 60 tons at 70 meters high? And you have to solve this problem because this is the ceiling of the room where the grave of Cheops was. And if you can't modelize that, you cannot solve the problem. But you know, when you come to Egypt and when you see those pyramids, this is really a huge problem for an engineer. You know, at this time, you have to keep in mind that it was built 5,000 years ago. That's incredible, you know?
Yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah. And that the stones were traveling sometimes 5,000 kilometers to reach, you know, so there were boats, there were systems, and they were brilliant minds. And you say they were mathematicians, or at least they were thinking like mathematicians, because that's how you were able to solve, in your perspective, the problem.
You know, this problem of the mathematics of the ancient Egypt is fundamental. And I can talk about the road. Je ne sais pas comment, I don't know how would you call that, you know. They have a scale. Une règle pharaonique, tu vois. Comment tu dis?
Like a ruler, like a pharaonic ruler.
Yes, yes. And you have several of these rulers in many museums in Paris, in Torino.
So those are units of measure.
Yes, and they have regular scales and irregular scales, and nobody solved this problem during 1 century. And of course, coming back from these strange travels in time, I solved the problem. Yeah. And I don't know what you call a pied à coulisse. No, it's a system you use to make the measure of the scale of the object. And it was...
We'll show a picture of it.
This technique was developed by Vernier in 1640. So this was used by the Egyptians 3,000 years ago. And this is sophisticated mathematics. So if we ask the question, do the ancient Egyptians add advanced mathematics? The answer is yes. And it's not about discovering the numbers like P, E, and so that in the measure. No, this problem of the road, Egyptian road, is basic, you know, fundamental. This is really advanced mathematics. Yeah. It's a proof.
Yeah, but it's amazing that we were not able to, that the information wasn't, like, we're only discovering, I mean, it's amazing that there's still mysteries about all this, and that this wasn't, the information wasn't transferred, wasn't taught, or wasn't transmitted.
Where does this information comes from? Yeah. That's a basic, exactly. Yeah. It's not normal, you know. It's not normal to find 5,000 years ago an object that was used only at the 17th century. Yeah.
And you link it back, because we're going to go back into how the pyramids were built, but you link back that knowledge to, you make a correlation between Atlantis and Egypt. Can you tell us about this and the floods and what you think happened?
It must come from somewhere. Yes. So you know that you have a text about the Atlantis, and it was supposed to be located between Spain and Morocco, and in that place you have hate, des hauts fonds, comme on appelle ça, tu vois. The place where the depth is moderate, it's only 30 meters deep. And in the past, this was the islands. And then when the ice began to melt, then the level of matter grew, and then they built a polder, like in Holland. and a polder with very big walls. So it was very correct to stand hurricanes, but not tsunami. And I think that Atlantis was destroyed by the tsunami. And the tsunami is not specific to Japan. We had tsunami in Atlantis too.
Yeah. And so it destroyed everything, you're saying?
Yes, and that it can destroy everything. And it corresponds to the text and to the fact that the navigation in that place was made problem because you had big stones. But you know, with moderate depth of water, the tempest destroy anything. So you cannot find artifacts easily. Everything is broken and transformed in very small pieces. Well, I know my English is...
You're doing well. He's doing well. Hold on to this because there is great information coming up. So this information... So Atlantis was there. It was destroyed. How does this knowledge being transferred to Egypt?
Well, the Atlants had to find a place to save themselves, so they took their boat, and I think they landed to Egypt, and they brought their knowledge with them. And you know, this knowledge, this is very surprising. It's a sophisticated knowledge, but they don't need anti-gravitation and laser to cut the stones. For an example, I have a friend who is in charge of the conservation of the Karnak place. And
Karnak is in Brittany, in France, north...
Karnak is in Egypt.
In Egypt, sorry.
In Egypt. And, you know, he is a man who carves the stones himself. And as you know, one problem was that the stones are very adjusted. Yes. And with irregular
like the stones you mean of the pyramids, they have no there's no space in between them. So how did that happen? How is it that perfectly
put a razor blade between the two? Yes. And he experienced the method to obtain that. Well, it is described in the comic book. I think the best is to send people to this book, which is translated in English, so you can read it in English, and you will find all that explained there. And of course, he took big stones, and he used a piece of copper, and then he can adjust this. So this is very brilliant, this is very original, but it doesn't need sophisticated science. You know?
Yeah. So they moved to Egypt. They were able to build like pyramids in 20 years' time, which is fast. There's a lot of theories on how those pyramids were built. You're interested about extraterrestrial beings. Some people say that there's extraterrestrial beings that came in, that moved things, that made it happen, because otherwise, how is it possible? But you actually found a human way that those stones were brought all the way up. Can you describe this?
Man can do many things, of course, and you don't need exotic science to make that. That's very surprising, you know. Well.
Yeah. So tell us about those ramps, those how the blocks were moved.
Yes, you know, I observed that when during these dreams I could see all that, and how to move the blocks. Some imagine a ramp circling around the pyramid, but they imagine a ramp made of brick. I prefer a ramp made of stone, and everything is described in the comic book. It is better to move the people there, and then, well, it's very sophisticated. It's engineering, advanced engineering.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you would slide it on top of this clay kind of material, and it would slide easily, right? And do those turns with some ropes and some of those. Yeah. The best is to see the comic book, because then you can see exactly you drew exactly the systems.
Yes. in the text we find the evocation of machinery made of wood, and I saw this machine working, and we had reconstructed this machine, and it works very well. I could pull a very heavy stone on this ramp and climb the block at this level.
So the big blocks, those tons of blocks, were moved by 6 people easily because the inclination of the
The inclination is weak. You have, for an example,
low, yeah. So they can pull it, but
on a pyramid like Cheops, you have 30 tons. 30 tons. Well, it's a long trip to climb the block, but the inclination is very weak, so you can move it very easily.
Yeah, and then there is some bit of stones that were discovered all around that they would remove because the ramps. I mean, I hope the word is ramp in English, but those kind of pathways all the way around that would go, but they would be held by some kind of materials at the end, right at the corner. That would be removed afterwards.
Yes, exactly. It's a sort of kit to make pyramids.
Yeah.
And if you, I don't know if you know that, but the first pyramid was built by Snefru. Snefru built 3 pyramids during his life, and so
it's mind blowing. Yeah.
Exactly. And in this technique, you can use materials from the first and use it for the second. You know, it's a removable piece of wood, and on the ancient photography you find this kind of blocks.
And you're saying there is earthquakes there, and not earthquakes, but like really the earth is shaking. So they had thought of this way of like this multi-layered foundation.
Exactly. In Egypt, one of the main problem is earthquakes, and Cairo was partially destroyed by an earthquake in the past. So the pyramids are built on a place made a sort of cake with layers, with strong materials and soft materials, and this alternance of strong and soft materials makes it very good to stand the earthquakes. And one example was the earthquake that destroyed a town in Portugal, and the place where the building were installed on such material standard the earthquake. Elsewhere they were completely destroyed. And so how could they have this kind of knowledge? That's too much. They have too much knowledge. That's
yeah. And how about the pharaoh? How do you say it in English? The mummies. What happened there? What is your point of view? I know you have a theory on it of what happened there. How, because those what was the role of their pyramids?
Yes, exactly. Well, a problem for the archaeologists is that they don't discover mummies or corpses or objects in the pyramid of Cheops, Khafre, and so on. So some were skeptical about the fact that it could be a place to put the corpse. Well, it could be a place for initiation of the priest.
Yeah. So you were saying they were putting people in there, and how long? For how long?
Well, it corresponds to another dream.
So you made another dream, and you saw that you were stuck in there, right? Because it was the initiation, from my understanding. The people had to go through a long time in there, and if they would survive, they would be initiated.
Exactly. You put the guy in the comment on dit
Grave in
the grave. You put a big stone on it, and you keep him during 24 baboons. It was a time unit. It's around 1 day. So you put him during 24 days. So either you have the possibility to put your body in a special condition.
24 hours. You're sure it's about 24 days?
No, it's not 24 hours, it's 24 days. And then 24 days after, you open the box and either the guy is dead, either he's alive. And if he stands that, he's initiated.
But that must mean that there is a lot of then bones everywhere. Or they would remove it.
Well, they remove it.
So they would be initiated to the next level to become themselves priests. To what? What was their calling after that?
You know, it was no difference between a priest and a scientist. It was the same person. You know, you could not imagine at this time to be a scientist and to do not have a religious attitude. So
why is that so? Why is science and spirituality, let's say, so intertwined in your perspective? Why is it one of the same? Science and spirituality, you're saying the priest is, but why? Because right now in our society, they're separated. They're crossed at each other. They're not happy with each other. But back then, they were the same.
You know,
I mean, not the same, but
always a time. In the present time, science is linked to a sort of religion, and this religion of today's religion is materialism. Yeah. This is another kind of religion. You know?
True. With many dogmas.
You know, you ask a classical scientist what happens after the death, he has no answer. Or his answer is nothing. And that's a belief. That's a religion.
Yeah. Huh? Yeah. So clearly you believe that there is more than just this lifetime. So the bodies were not there anymore. So there was a big threat and people stole, you were saying, those, because you explained to me in a video in French that those bodies those kings were just stolen out of the pyramids because of a big how do you say that in English, a big threat over the country.
Yes, in 2200 before the Christ, there was a terrible event on all the north of Africa, and the country became dried. And you know, when you look at the North Africa, it's a desert almost everywhere, except on Egypt, and you have a little cord, green, and this green is vegetation, and it is just because the Nile flow. And see, if the Nile doesn't flow, that's terrible, you know. So the people were dying of starvation, and there are ancient texts in which the writer writes the parents were eating their children because they had nothing to eat. So at this time, all the historians agree with that. There were a terrible earthquake for the society, and the pharaoh had no power. There were no police, nothing. So it's normal that all the graves were explored, and everything was destroyed.
What is, for you, the implication that we finally would put on some answers to all those question marks that we have about Egypt? Like, why is it taking so long to solve this problem? Because, why is it so long to get answers? Because there is exotic answers, there's a bit of everything, and there's no consensus.
The first thing you have to think about, it was Egyptologists. We are not physicists. There were no chemists. There are
no chemists or physicians. Yeah.
They just read papers, papyrus. They were reading papers, and I had succeeded to to publish a paper about the road and this mathematician. That's a good thing. So I can consider I am an Egyptologist because I have good papers published in a top level review. But about building of pyramids, the paper were refused because they asked, on which papers have you found that? So for Egyptologists, the only thing you may consider is papyrus. So they are waiting, where is the papyrus? Where I will find that? But the papyrus, you can use it to make fire. In Babylon, we find a lot of information because it was carved on pottery. And pottery has no value. You cannot make fire with that. So you have library with 100,000 documents. But in Egypt, everything was burnt. So you don't find, about mathematics, you have 3 papyrus. And they refer to very primitive mathematics, If you consider that it is mathematics of the ancient Egypt, you fail completely. Everything is missing. But anyway, they know too much. It's too much knowledge for this time.
And how about other pyramids around the world? Because we talk about Bosnia, I'm thinking of Chichen Itza or Yucatan or other places. Were those being built at not the same time, but how come this? It's still the same kind of. I guess the science behind it should be similar, or the formulas, no?
For me, the main problem, the most amazing subject was this road. Because here we have the proof of top-level mathematics.
You mean, what did you say, Israel?
The road.
The road.
La règle.
The ruler. Oh, do you mean the unit of measure is the main thing that... Okay.
This ruler shows the advanced mathematics. Yeah. It's a proof. It cannot be argued about that. This rule was discovered more than 2,000 and a half between the Christ. It has no place there. It's exactly if you find a transistor in a grave. And then if you have if you look at the techniques, for example, for the boat, if you go to Egypt, you have a museum which is called the Museum of the Boat, and probably you know that just in the vicinity of the Pyramid of Cheops, we found a boat 43 meters long. It was in pieces, and we had the instruction to reconstruct it. And then an Egyptian archaeologist reconstructed the boat, and you can have a look at it. But when you look at it, I used to practice sailboat and so on. And when you look at it, it's a boat built for the open sea. Because of the structure. For an example, if you consider the first airplanes, they were made by wood and comment on dit, la toile. Tu vois, comme l'avion de Berlioz, les premiers avions. The first airplanes were very primitive. And then when you take today's airplane, it's like a tube. Le mot, revêtement travaillant, it means that you have no structure, in fact. You have just a shell. And the boats of the ancient Egypt were built that way.
So you mean they would open up front and carry, as those big cargoes now, would take the stone inside. But as you explained to me, this needed to be on the beach. It couldn't be at the port, right? Exactly. So that the stone would be slided inside.
Exactly. And it was referred by historians of the antiquity. Yeah. They said they have a very strange way to carry the things. They pull the boat on the beach, and then they open the entrance, they put the object inside, and then they reconstruct the boat. And it's like now we have more modern airplanes that have the front parts, which is removed to put big objects,
And then yeah, there was this other thing so that you could carry the stone from over the water with this wooden
Well, you know,
kind of shell. One to the next that you could just slide it, right?
Yes, yes. But you know what I think really that the ancient Egyptians have crossed the Atlantic Ocean. For, you know, a dream to find people to rebuild this kind of ship, sailing ship, and to cross the ocean with. I'm sure it works. So if it's feasible, it has been done. And in fact, these boats are very efficient for the waves, for the winds. The sail is very sophisticated. They have one sail for every wind regime. Our sailing boats have three kind of sails. You have one sail for when the wind comes from the back, And as a guy who know very well the sailing boat, I was impressed, And in fact, when you go to Egypt and on the Nile, you have, how would you call this today's boat? Felouk. You understand what is felouk? The felouk has a very strange sail. And in this sail, you have the concept of the ancient Egypt. This sail can be used in two regimes. It is explained in the comic book too. So then when you look at you can find in Egypt, you find techniques sophisticated, very intelligent. And then the conclusion is that they have crossed the ocean. Yeah. So it's normal that you find a pyramid in Mexico.
Yeah. You're saying every scientist has to be a bit crazy or has to have those kind of wild imagination, like real scientists. And kind of, like you're saying, every scientist must have, or all the ones that have invented, created things, had those wild visions, out-of-body experience, or dreams. They're just not saying it, but this goes hand in hand, right?
Well, it's very common, but they don't talk.
Yeah, you dare to talk now, you're 82.
No, I'm 82, so I talk.
Yeah.
So, but we will talk about that in the next video, about extraterrestrial. What how could you imagine a scientist who say, well, I have phone call from people who pretend to come from another planet, or
with valuable information, because we'll talk about that in the next video. It's wild how you receive all this. Yeah. So thank you so much, Jean-Pierre. Hold on. Go to the next video because it's brilliant on the UFOs.
I did my best.
You did well. You did well. Thank you for hanging in there. Thank you for sharing this video, and please watch part 2 on the UFOs because this is very interesting information. Jean-Pierre receives in a very unusual way all this information, all those formulas that help him to know that interstellar traveling is possible for us as human beings. So it's very much anchored in reality. I look forward to share that with you, my delicious co-creators. Big kisses from France, beautiful France, Bordeaux. Amazing heat right now, actually. But anyway, big kiss. Don't forget to download his comic book. And if you know a publisher, yes, okay. Because this man has a lot of information to share. So just be in touch with him through his website. We'll put all the contact information under this video. And may you have a beautiful, amazing day. Big kiss, my delicious co-creators. Speak to you soon. Bye-bye. Bye.